We're seeing AI sort of dominate nearly every category. All you have to do is look at the stock market recently, as well as all the hype on the AI purchase of these chip makers and these CEOs who are like, we're buying CapEx, machine servers, AI driven. And it's worked its way into the talent world as well, hasn't it?
It has. It kind of reminds me of Y2K in a weird way.
I know I'm supposed to be doing something. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to do something.
It's just busy work, and we need to be frenetic, and it is creating a frenetic feel, certainly, and within our space, in the talent access space. It's a question I get daily. How are we implementing AI into our own process? How do we take this into our in-house recruiting process? What are the effects? What are the tools? And the questions become, interesting to kind of sit down and think about and try to identify exactly where in our actual habits and process would AI even fit. And so it's just something that we're really talking about right now.
And AI is certainly incredibly valuable when you have something that has to crunch large volumes of numbers in a highly predictable environment. So we have to keep that in mind, in a highly predictable environment, and provide insights based on trained algorithms. So again, certainly not an AI expert, but I know the base value of AI. So if we look at talent, we certainly have large numbers. However, the data to train the algorithm is what I question, because the data is what? Self-reporting.
It's self-reporting. It's the resume that everybody is asked to put on, air quotes, paper and implement it into a tool. But it's all of our own thoughts on what we are good at and what we excel at. And so how can you create a foundational benchmark when everybody's input is different? How does that work in AI?
And also, and you and I have heard this so many times, and I want to dig into the resume side of things as well. Certainly AI, I think, has value on broader sense. It's sort of incorporated in LinkedIn. It's sort of incorporated in some of the better CRMs like Loxo, right? They're using an AI function within those, so to speak. But here's my question. How many times have you had a search and the resume goes into the client and the client agrees, although the resume really doesn't match exactly, but agrees to interview the person. At the end of the interview, you get the debrief from the client, and what do they say? They say, her resume wasn't exactly what we were looking for, but her personality, and she fits our culture. AI that for me.
Well, you can't, because it's human. It's human based, and it's perception of the reality that the individual is in. And it depends on the culture. It depends on the person. It depends on the person who's doing the interviewing. It's all personal. So how can you actually put that into an algorithm within AI? And I think that's part of the conundrum that we're in right now, with massive pressure for us to all run towards this new ideation, which isn't going away, but is it really going to make that much of a foundational difference in our space and in our industry? So to your point, resume, yes, those are static skills on a piece of paper, which are still self-reporting. So still, let's talk about that. But the other side of it is, how many times do we see, as you say, the interviewer who goes, okay, matches what I thought I wanted, but wow, when I actually met this person and had the conversation with them, they're the one.
Yeah. Also, if we look at it from a search perspective, most of the time, if you're going to be working in talent access, and I think this will be even independent of headhunting in the future, the best people are not submitting their profiles to be examined. They're generally called, and so we've got to get a baseline agreement on non-self-reporting data on the resume, and then you need the assessment on the personality, or let's just call it, the DISC assessment, or any of that. And so somebody's got to apply for that, take a test, put it into a data set that's consumable, plus their resume, translate that into a data set that's consumable. And in the current day and age, I don't see the A players, the force multipliers, the lightning rod hires, the Price's Law people, whatever you want to call it, who move the needle, submitting themselves to that.
Well, so there's another really interesting point. So even if AI were to have a place in the recruiting process, who does that affect when it comes to hiring? Is it meant for those seasonal hires where they really only need 5 skills for 6 months for the job? Is it meant for an individual contributor who must have these specific skills? Is it meant for the executive, the C-suite, the board level positions where the requirements and qualifications are so vast? So that, again, I mean, that's a topic that I get asked often, is if you're going to use it, to what role and where does it play?
Yeah, and I think it starts, like you said, in the bottom of the period where you have the high volume hires, the 5 must-haves. People are going to submit themselves to a predictable data set, and usually that's done in an assessment of sorts. Most of the time, though, it's going to be self-reporting. It still comes back to your C++. Rate yourself. I'm a 4 out of 5. Like, are you? Again, contextually against what? You and I know, though, over our thousands of placements you and I have been involved in, this is as much, if not more, of an art than it is a science.
Yeah.
Hiring talent at the elite levels, the high performers, the top 5%ers, no matter what you tell me, still sits as an art.
Yeah, it does. And it's really interesting to think about the evolution of our industry. Like, remember before LinkedIn?
I don't, but go ahead.
I don't.
But you're right. I mean,
you must, because I do actually remember.
yes, I do. I do. But remember, I often remind our audience that I started when you mailed resumes in
Yeah.
to clients to get an interview. Okay, so I go back way back then, right? So I'm dating myself. But having said that, you had, for those that don't know, there was Monster.com, and Monster.com was interesting. And then we were told it was the end of recruiting, if you were around back then. And Monster.com was basically resumes online of people who were unemployed. But there became a trigger point, and I don't know what it was, but there was a black swan event that created the permissiveness of an individual to put their entire profile online to expose themselves to all potential hiring opportunities, and nobody ever called them down. Because on Monster, I knew people who put their resumes on Monster and got called down to HR shortly thereafter and said, why is your resume up online? So I will say AI plays a place, and it might or might not be in your and my professional lifetime, that I forecast, and I've talked about this a couple of years ago, I do foresee a future where behind a lock and key, a digital lock and key, individuals will self-report based on an agreed upon assessment of skills, experience, employers, outcomes, compensation, personality, assessments, etc., and they will hold that key. And there will then be, this may be the twilight of recruiting, there will be organizations that put, here's opportunities we have online, and we guarantee you there's no HR involved. There's a high level of security before it, and you will be able to give your key for a short amount of time to the organization, and they will have less than 24 hours to view your information, and then it locks up again, and that'll give more respect to the individual.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And then AI then will take over that decision-making process. But I don't know if it'll be within the next 10 or 15 years. But it's the most logical transition from LinkedIn now over to, because LinkedIn gave the power to the individual. It allowed the individual to have a full look of the marketplace, and it allows the marketplace to have a full look at them.
That's right.
But only what you want to show. But you, of course, keep it close because you don't want to show all of it. But the second that you give full 100% security to the individual, and I will give it to you, you have less than 24 hours if you choose this mission, right?
you may look at it and then
right.
you will disappear.
And then it's gone.
Yeah.
And I see that will have an AI traction to it, but before then, I'm not just seeing it.
Well, I mean, that's an interesting scenario that you just painted. In that, though, we haven't really touched on the bias and the non-bias part of this. So when you think about, for all those years, people would just put all of their information on LinkedIn, even their addresses. Can you imagine? Remember the time when you would see people's addresses in an open platform like that? And so if we're going towards a place where we're going to have something other than humans create that decision for us, how do you litigiously and how do you make sure that the bias doesn't creep in? How do you build that into the tool? That's my question.
It's really hard to do because the bias starts all the way in. There's bias in all hiring processes right now, and no matter whether it's a bias on, gender, whether it's a bias on race, whether it's a bias on age. So that bias leaks in and is performed here anyway. I think your bias and liability there in AI across the board is legitimate in any question. But going back to your original statement, here's why I think right now AI is on the top of everybody's CEO. If you watch Bloomberg in the morning, or you watch MSNBC, or you watch any of that, this run on AI stocks, and now subsequently the bubble that didn't burst but sort of slagged a little bit, is because they've been told by consulting firms that AI is coming, you better be able to do something. And actually, Deloitte just released a CEO paper last week. I shared it with the organization.
Yes.
And in there, one of the top 3 was, how is AI going to impact your organization? And they're asking CEOs this, and these are 65-year-old white dudes, most of them, who have no idea. They can't even get on Google Sheets. Yet they are driving the decisions on AI from an ill-educated perspective. And I think that's really where you're running right now. I don't think we have an AI issue in talent access for at least another 10 or 15 years.
Yeah, I think so too. And then when we think about the tools that surround our process that some companies tend to leverage, some companies don't. You mentioned it, the assessments. Even AI in that genre of the world of what we're assessing people on, I just can't see how it works, because you're asking something to assess by voice activation or face recognition, the neuroscience of your brain in terms of how you assess talent coming in the door. You have to have the human element. So until we can replicate that, I don't think it's there.
You also bring up an interesting subject as we unpack this whole thing is, and if you continue to leave talent access in the hands of HR, I don't care what kind of brilliance you put into an AI model, you have to fix the system, and you have to give talent access a different reporting structure than into HR. And love my HR people, however, you guys will all self-admit that the thing you dislike the most is recruiting. So therefore, most of you don't come out of a talent access mindset. You don't understand the talent access mindset. And so if you put those AI tools eventually in the hands of HR, it's putting the wrong weapon in the hands of the wrong person.
I saw it happen a couple of years ago in another scenario where HR implemented, it was a little old-fashioned at the point, but a video interviewing tool. So not pure AI, but still technology-based. And it completely wiped out the entire pipeline, because everything got misconstrued by the 2-second video that this person was unaware of that they had to prepare for, and suddenly they're talking to the camera. So yeah, to your point, HR is always trying to find those, and respectfully so, they're underwater and completely slammed with other parts of the people business inside the organization, looking for ways to kind of, fast track through the recruiting process. Well, the reality is there isn't.
No.
Because it's not an easy process, and I think that's where we're going with this.
Correct. Yeah. Correct. And so that's where my point is HR should not be handling talent access. And the talent access process right now, if you increase efficiencies in a process that shouldn't exist already, you're just going to create a monster.
Yep.